Good morning. So today what I'm here to talk to about is who becomes a leader. Now this research began a long time ago in a galaxy far away when I was 6 at my first Singell family reunion. See, my father came from a large family of 9 brothers and sisters, all who were fruitful and multiplied, such that we could have 11 on an 11 football game with subs. And we did. And the education of my family members varied quite dramatically, all the way from my grandfather, who failed to complete junior high school, to my father, who had a PhD in economics. And upon reflection, this was really the beginning of my interest in economics, my interest in leadership, and even my preparation for becoming the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. For this sparked my fascination, what economists refer to as human capital, the investments that people make in education throughout their life that makes them more productive. What I learned from watching this large group of human beings, all of roughly equal ability, was 2 things. First, you are what you know. Your universe and the size of it is defined by your education. This has profound effects on what your opportunities and choices are, and that's the second thing. And this effect is magnified for people who are in positions of leadership, because your choices and opportunities affect those of others. And my research and the research of others has confirmed this finding. Leaders are made, not born. Preparation for leadership occurs throughout a person's life and career. John Wooden, one of Indiana's most famous native sons, actually began his career as a school teacher, and he admits to becoming increasingly frustrated by the fact that the parents would come to him and say, "My little Johnny, I sure you was an A student," when in fact he knew that Johnny was a B student if he worked hard. And so he thought about what was it that constituted success and how did one achieve it? And he came up with the following notion. Success is the peace of mind that is the direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you did the best to become the best you are capable of becoming. For John Wooden, success was not about outcomes. It was about productive effort. This was the beginning of his famous coaching philosophy, the pyramid of success. John Wooden was a successful leader because he lived by the philosophy, never stop seeking to improve through a commitment to learn. Now, my referencing of John Wooden is not random. I love basketball, and it probably explains how I ended up in Indiana, and it most definitely explains how I came to study leadership. You see, I went to graduate school in Southern California in the 1980s. This was the time of showtime with the Lakers, led by Magic Johnson, and tenacious defense and precision offense run by the Celtics and Larry Bird. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were great leaders because not only were they great individual players, but they made their teammates better. How did they do this? They did this by knowing the skills of their teammates and getting them the ball in a place where they could be successful. Good leaders get their teammates the ball in places where they can be successful. Now, while I loved basketball, my wife did not fully understand this until we moved as newlyweds to Southern California, and I began to watch what she saw as an endless stream of NBA basketball games. And really the first disagreement of our marriage, she came in while I was watching a basketball game and says, "How can you possibly justify spending so much time watching basketball when you have so little time?" I thought about it for a second, looked her straight in the eye, and said to her honestly, "I'm doing research." After she, let's just say the disagreement ended unresolved. And so I asked my fellow graduate student colleagues, you gotta help me out here. How could I possibly justify what seemed like an absurd statement that I was doing research? And my team, the Los Angeles Lakers, were coached by Pat Riley. Now, Pat Riley typified what was true of most coaches in the game. He was a former player who was good, but not great. He was more successful by grit than by gift. So I began to think about, how could I get data to be able to study the investments that players make during their career that affect whether they coach or not? Now, basketball data, unfortunately, wasn't up to the task, but baseball data, where statistics are king. I was able to then find every player who started their career between 1950 and 1965, follow their entire career, and be able to see their opportunity to coach afterwards. And what I observed in that baseball data was what I observed that day watching basketball, and what turns out to be true in many professions, including my own, which, the academy. And that is, there we go. Good, but not great talents typically serve in positions of leadership. So, in baseball data, one of the things that I found was that people who were really good hitters, particularly those that had to work hard at becoming good hitters, were more likely to coach. And the reason why that is that is a skill you can teach. However, good sluggers, people who hit a lot of home runs, were actually less likely to coach. Why is that? Well, number one, it's a skill you can't teach. And number two, it turns out that it raises your opportunities outside the game of baseball much more than in. You can sell Wheaties. The same thing is true in academia. It turns out one of the things that I found is that the best scholars do not become administrators. Now remember, I'm a dean. However, you've got to be good enough to be able to recognize talent, and good enough to be respected by talent in order to be able to be an administrator. So, this is important. Greatness is something that is accessible to very few, but goodness is accessible to many with hard work. You don't have to be great to be a leader. You have to be good. Goodness is hard. Don't get me wrong. It takes efforts, many, many years of efforts and commitment to excellence. And this is my last point, and that is that, in fact, leaders typically make very specific types of investments throughout their life. So, for example, in baseball, one of the things I found is that people who played catcher, second base, shortstop, were more likely to coach. Why? Because it required regular investments in not only their own success, but the success of their teammates. You had to be able to work with others. The same thing is true in academia. I've watched my colleagues spend very different amounts of time in terms of their dedication to teaching. Teaching, if you take it seriously, requires the ability to learn how to communicate. Communication is a general skill. It's a skill that raises your productivity not only as a teacher, not only as a scholar, but also in administration. And what I found is the people who are good teachers are more likely to go into administration and more likely to be successful once they enter it. So, this is my third principle. General, rather than specific skill investments, lead to leadership, particularly those that depend on working with others. This is important for me as the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences because this is the liberal arts model. The liberal arts model focuses on general skills. It says, hey, how can we question critically, think logically, communicate clearly, act creatively, live ethically, rather than a professional set of skills. Now, why? As a labor economist, I can tell you that's important. Why is it important? Because half the jobs that are going to exist in the next 20 years do not yet exist. You can't prepare for them as a professional. So what that means is that in a world of rapid change, general skills developing through a liberal arts education will define who will be the leaders of the next generation. Being a good accountant is a very valuable thing, but it is not what makes you a leader. Okay, so who becomes a leader? Well, what my research shows is that leaders are made, not born. They're good but not great. That they make general investments rather than specific investments. What that means is that no one in this room is absolved from the burden of leadership. Leadership is accessible to everyone. Not everyone will necessarily take that opportunity, but all it requires is goodness, and goodness requires hard work. So if you're ready to put in the time, you can be a leader. In fact, chances are you're already a leader and responsible for the success of your organization. If you think about what it is that you do, you have leadership responsibilities in your job. So who becomes a leader? Well, in the next century, the problems that are going to be facing us are going to be complex and multifaceted. They will not be solved by a single individual at the head of an organization being able to direct what happens. Those problems are simply too hard to solve. They are going to be solved by relatively flat organizations. And that flat requires trust. Our previous talk talked about the notion of trust. You need to have trust in organizations. Relatively flat, and give those individuals the opportunity to be leaders. And it will be those leaders pursuing excellence individually that will lead to success. So who becomes a leader? Chances are it's you. So jump in. That's it.